Hello and welcome to our channel. Today, we unravel the horrifying story of Albert Fish, one of America's most sinister killers. A man whose twisted crimes still haunt us to this day. If you're brave enough to explore the darkest corners of the human mind, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Stay with us, and let's dive into this chilling tale. Albert Fish, known by many macabre titles such as the Gray Man, the Boogeyman, and the Werewolf of Wisteria, remains one of history's most infamous serial killers. His crimes were not just shocking, they were incomprehensible in their cruelty, driven by a deeply fractured psyche. Fish's life was a descent into unimaginable darkness, where innocence was preyed upon, and pain became his gospel. Albert Fish, whose real name was Hamilton Howard Fish, born on May 19, 1870, in Washington, D.C. into a family that seemed cursed by misfortune. His father, Randall Fish, was a 75-year-old riverboat captain and Civil War veteran whose declining health left the family financially and emotionally unstable. His mother, Ellen Fish, was younger but burdened with the weight of poverty and mental illness. The Fish family tree was rife with insanity. One uncle suffered from mania and was institutionalized. Another relative was confined for religious delusions. Fish's sister experienced severe mental impairments, and his brother battled alcoholism and rage issues. Ellen herself claimed to have visions and hallucinations. It was into this unstable, fractured family that Albert was born, the youngest of 4 siblings. At a young age, Albert showed signs of odd behavior. Quiet and withdrawn, he rarely interacted with other children and seemed to inhabit a world of his own. The tragedy of his father's sudden death in 1875, when Albert was just 5 years old, marked the first major upheaval in his life. Unable to provide for her children, Ellen placed Albert in St. John's Orphanage, a decision that would haunt him, and, by extension, the world, for the rest of his life. St. John's Orphanage was a place of torment. The nuns who ran it wielded their authority with brutal efficiency, punishing the children for the slightest infractions. For Albert, the beatings were particularly severe. His quiet demeanor made him an easy target, and his sensitive nature amplified the trauma. For most children, such abuse would instill fear or resentment. For Albert, it ignited something far darker, a connection between pain and pleasure. By his own later admissions, the beatings aroused him, planting the seeds of his sadomasochistic tendencies. "I learned to like the beatings," he confessed in a chilling reflection on his time at the orphanage. Beyond the physical abuse, the orphanage exposed Albert to a rigid, unforgiving interpretation of religion. Stories of saints who endured torture and martyrdom fascinated him. He began to see suffering as a form of divine expression, an idea that would later shape his twisted worldview. When his mother reclaimed him at the age of 9, Albert left the orphanage, but he did not leave its lessons behind. He carried them deep within, where they festered like an infection, warping his perceptions of morality, pleasure, and pain. Albert's teenage years were marked by increasing isolation and escalating deviance. He began experimenting with self-mutilation, poking needles into his body and later embedding them permanently into his pelvis. He also developed a fixation on bodily waste, engaging in acts of coprophilia and urophilia. At the same time, Albert explored his burgeoning sexuality. He entered relationships with older men who introduced him to sadomasochistic practices. These experiences further blurred the lines between pleasure and pain, reinforcing the distorted lessons he had learned at St. John's. By the time he was in his early 20s, Albert's fantasies had grown darker. He imagined inflicting pain on others, particularly children. These fantasies were not fleeting, they consumed him, shaping his identity and setting the stage for his transformation from a troubled individual into a predator. In 1898, Albert married Anna Hoffman, a woman 19 years his junior. Together, they had 6 children. To the outside world, Albert appeared to be a hard-working family man. He worked as a house painter and provided for his family, maintaining an air of normalcy that masked his inner turmoil. But even during these years of outward stability, Albert's deviance continued to grow. He encouraged his children to beat him with a paddle studded with nails, disguising the activity as a game. He also began hearing voices, which he believed were divine commands urging him toward violence. In 1917, Anna left Albert for another man, taking the children with her. The abandonment devastated him, pushing him further into madness. Alone and untethered, Albert began to fully embrace the darkness within. Albert Fish's first known act of violence occurred in 1910. He lured Thomas Kedden, a young man with limited mental capacity, into a relationship. Over the course of 2 weeks, Fish tortured Kedden, culminating in the mutilation of his genitals. Remarkably, Fish decided to release Kedden, leaving him permanently scarred but alive. This incident marked Fish's transition from fantasy to reality. By the 1920s, Fish had become a seasoned predator. He targeted children from poor neighborhoods, luring them with promises of candy, jobs, or small sums of money. His frail appearance and unassuming demeanor made him seem harmless, allowing him to gain the trust of both parents and children. Fish's crimes during this period were numerous, though many remain undocumented. He later claimed to have killed over 100 children, though this number has never been verified. What is certain is that his methods were unspeakably cruel. He tortured his victims, deriving pleasure from their pain, and often mutilated their bodies after death. Fish's most infamous murders include those of Francis McDonnell, Billy Gaffney, and Grace Budd. Each crime was marked by a combination of cunning deception and unimaginable brutality. Francis McDonnell, 1924. The 9-year-old boy disappeared while playing near his Staten Island home. Witnesses reported seeing a strange old man with a gaunt face. Francis's body was later found, strangled and mutilated. The community was shaken, but the killer remained at large. Billy Gaffney, 1927. 4-year-old Billy vanished from his apartment building in Brooklyn. Fish later confessed to torturing and killing the boy, describing the gruesome details in a chilling confession that included cannibalism. Grace Budd, 1928. Disguising himself as Frank Howard, a kindly farmer, Fish visited the Budd family to offer Grace's brother a job. Instead, he persuaded the family to let Grace accompany him to a supposed party. Grace's disappearance remained a mystery until Fish sent a letter to her family in 1934, detailing her murder and cannibalization. The letter to the Budd family was Fish's undoing. Investigators traced the envelope to a boarding house, where Fish was apprehended. During his interrogation, he confessed to multiple murders, describing his acts with a detached calmness that horrified even seasoned detectives. When Albert Fish was put on trial in 1935, the entire nation watched in horror as the details of his crimes were laid bare for all to see. He seemed almost indifferent to the proceedings, as if he were detached from the gravity of the situation. His behavior was erratic at times, but he appeared remarkably calm when recounting his crimes, as though recounting a casual story. During his trial, Fish's defense attorneys attempted to plead insanity, arguing that he was not responsible for his actions due to his delusions. They pointed to his belief that God had instructed him to commit his crimes. However, Fish's clear-headed and calculated confessions made it difficult for the jury to believe that he was truly insane. His detailed accounts of each murder, combined with his cold detachment, convinced the jury of his guilt. The evidence against Fish was overwhelming: his letters, his confessions, the physical evidence found at his crime scenes, everything pointed to him as the mastermind of one of the most horrific killing sprees in American history. After a brief deliberation, the jury found Albert Fish guilty of murder. He was sentenced to death. On January 16, 1936, Albert Fish was executed by electrocution at Sing Sing Prison in New York. His execution was carried out with chilling finality. The man who had terrorized the nation with his brutal acts of violence and cannibalism was no more. Fish's final words, spoken just before the switch was pulled, were unsettling in their simplicity: "I don't even know why I'm here." The execution of Albert Fish marked the end of a chapter in American criminal history, but the story of his crimes would haunt the public for years to come. His crimes were so unimaginable, so unspeakably horrific, that they became a dark legend, one that continued to inspire fear and fascination. The aftermath of Fish's crimes sent shockwaves through American society. The revelation that a man could be capable of such horrific acts, murder, mutilation, cannibalism, left an indelible scar on the public consciousness. Newspapers across the country ran sensational headlines, detailing the grisly nature of his crimes. Fish's case became a symbol of the dangers lurking in society's shadows, the monsters who live in plain sight. It led to widespread public fear, especially about the safety of children. Parents began to take greater care in protecting their children, and Fish's name became synonymous with every parent's worst nightmare, the evil that hides behind a mask of normalcy. Albert Fish's psychiatric evaluations revealed a man deeply detached from reality. He believed he was following divine commands, interpreting his horrific acts as religious rituals. His fixation on pain, both self-inflicted and imposed on others, was rooted in his traumatic childhood and warped sense of spirituality. Albert Fish's life was one of terrifying contradictions. He was a man who lived among us, yet he was nothing like us. His true nature was a hidden, monstrous secret, buried deep beneath the surface. His crimes were the manifestations of a mind utterly broken, a mind that sought to dehumanize and consume. To this day, the story of Albert Fish remains a chilling reminder of how dark the human soul can become when it is allowed to fester unchecked. Thank you for joining with us on this chilling journey into the mind of Albert Fish. If you found this story as unsettling as we did, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means the world. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a dive into the darkest corners of history. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, the shadows are always watching. We'll see you in the next video.